Black mechanic is told to go mop the floors, but she makes the impossible engine run. The old man points a greasy finger at her. The mops are in the back. Make yourself useful. Maya looks from the man to the legendary engine in front of her, the 1969 Chargers 426 Hemi that nobody in 3 states could fix. She just smiles, a calm, knowing smile that doesn't reach her eyes. When the car's owner sees what she does next, he will be absolutely speechless. The air in Al's classic garage in Austin, Texas, was thick with the smell of oil and arrogance. It was 2024, but for Maya Washington, a 28-year-old specialist in vintage American powertrains, it felt like 1964. Al, the garage owner, a man with a stained t-shirt and a permanent scowl, folded his arms. He had been expecting M. Washington, the expert flown in to solve an impossible problem. He was not expecting a young black woman in clean, professional overalls. "You're the one?" he grunted, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. "I am," Maya said, her voice firm and steady. Her focus was already on the car, a beautiful but silent beast of American muscle. The central problem was clear. The Hemi engine was a masterpiece of engineering, but this one was a ghost. It wouldn't turn over, it wouldn't ignite, it wouldn't even whisper. Al's team of veteran mechanics had spent a month on it and gotten absolutely nowhere. The car's wealthy owner was losing his patience and his money. "My guys with 30 years of experience each couldn't figure it out," Al said, his tone dripping with condescension. "What makes you think you can?" He gestured dismissively toward the corner of the shop. "Look, I have to pay your consultation fee either way. The floor's a mess. The mop is in the closet. Why don't you make yourself useful?" Maya didn't even flinch. She simply walked over to the engine bay. Her fingers hovered over the cold metal, not quite touching it yet, as if she were listening to a story only she could hear. In the background, Al's other mechanics stopped their work to watch, some of them smirking. They were expecting a show, maybe some angry words or even tears. They were about to get a masterclass. This story is a powerful reminder of what happens when prejudice meets undeniable talent. If you believe in justice, let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to tell us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe, because you will not want to miss what happens next. Maya saw it almost immediately, the tiny, nearly invisible hairline fracture near the engine block mount. She noticed the slight misalignment of a custom fuel line, a sloppy job. She knew this car. Not just the model, but this specific car. Al was about to repeat his insulting order when Maya finally spoke, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "I don't need a mop," she said, looking directly at him. "I need a 7/16 wrench, a torque wrench, and for everyone here to stand back." What secret did this engine hold? And how was Maya about to turn this garage and Al's entire world completely upside down? Al snorted, turning his back to stomp toward his office. "Fine, break it. It's on you." The other mechanics, a group of middle-aged men named Rick and Gary, watched with crossed arms. They expected failure. It was the only outcome they could imagine. Maya ignored them all. She laid out her own tools on a clean magnetic tray, each instrument shining under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her movements were economical and precise. There was no hesitation. She wasn't just a mechanic, she was a surgeon, and the Hemi was her patient. The garage, which had felt hostile, now simply faded into the background. There was only her, the engine, and a story written in steel and oil. Her background wasn't from a trade school or a community college. It was forged. Her grandfather, Pops Washington, could make any engine sing. He had owned a small but legendary shop in East Austin for 40 years. Maya had grown up there, her hands stained with grease by the age of 10, learning the language of carburetors and camshafts. He taught her that every classic car had a soul, and to fix it, you had to listen to its history. A phone rang loudly from Al's office. The muffled, angry shouting confirmed it was the car's owner, a wealthy collector named Mr. Sterling. The pressure in the garage instantly tripled. Al had promised results, and now the deadline was closing in. As Maya worked, her focus was absolute. She disconnected the fuel line with a surgeon's care, inspected the spark plugs, and checked the timing chain. Rick, one of the older mechanics, sidled up. "The distributor is seized. We tried everything. You put a wrench on it, you'll snap the shaft clean off." He said it not as a warning, but as a statement of fact. He was waiting for her to fail. Maya simply nodded, her eyes still on the engine. She had faced seized distributors before, but she also noticed something else. A small, almost polished-away weld mark on the chassis right below the engine mount. It was a custom reinforcement. It was crude but effective, and it was familiar. It was her grandfather's signature. Suddenly, the job wasn't just professional anymore. It was deeply personal. "You need a breaker bar for that," Gary, the other mechanic, chimed in, a smirk on his face. "Or a sledgehammer." Al stormed back out of his office, his face red from the phone call with Mr. Sterling. "What's the hold-up? Are you working on it, or just staring at it?" He saw her examining the distributor. "Rick told you it's seized. We're not paying for a new one when you snap it. Get away from it." Maya looked up from the engine, her expression unreadable. "A breaker bar will snap the shaft," she stated calmly, "and a sledgehammer will crack the block. Your methods are the reason this car is still sitting here." The direct challenge hung in the air. Al's face went from red to purple. Rick and Gary exchanged an uneasy look. No one ever talked back to Al. "I've been fixing cars since before you were born," Al spat. "Fixing them or breaking them?" Maya retorted, her voice low but sharp. She wasn't being emotional, she was stating a technical conclusion. "This isn't about force, it's about thermodynamics." She ignored Al and turned to a workbench, grabbing a can of compressed air duster and a small propane torch. The other mechanics looked on, confused. What was she planning to do? The conflict shifted. It was no longer about Maya's identity, but about her methods. Al represented the old way, brute force, arrogance, and a refusal to learn. Maya represented the new, knowledge, precision, and a deeper understanding of the machine. The tension was thick enough to taste. One of them was about to be proven catastrophically wrong in front of the entire shop. "You're going to set the whole car on fire, you idiot," Al bellowed. Maya ignited the small torch, the blue flame hissing quietly. She didn't aim it at the distributor itself. Instead, she began to gently heat the aluminum housing around it. Her movements were steady, patient. She was in complete control. The men watched, mesmerized, their skepticism slowly turning into a tense, silent curiosity. She was doing something none of them had ever seen before. As she heated the housing, Maya's mind raced. The weld mark wasn't the only thing. While checking the cabin for any diagnostic notes, she had run her fingers under the worn dashboard. Tucked deep inside, taped to a wiring harness, was a small folded piece of paper. It was a time slip from a drag race. The date was 1975. The driver's name was listed as W. Washington. Her grandfather, a younger mechanic, a kid named Kevin, who usually handled tire changes, had been watching silently from the corner. He was captivated. Unlike the others, he wasn't threatened. He was learning. He quietly walked over and placed a fire extinguisher nearby. Not because he thought she'd fail, but as a professional precaution. It was a small gesture, but it was a clear signal. His loyalty was with competence, not with his boss. The phone in Al's office rang again. It was Mr. Sterling. 2 days, Al," he heard the owner shout through the phone. "The Lone Star Classic Car Show is in 2 days. Is it running or not?" The time pressure was now immense. This wasn't just a repair, it was a race. With the housing heated for precisely 90 seconds, Maya put the torch down. She then took the can of compressed air, turned it upside down, and sprayed the liquid propellant directly onto the head of the distributor shaft. The metal hissed, a small cloud of vapor instantly forming as it flash froze. She had created a temperature differential. The heated aluminum housing expanded, and the frozen steel shaft contracted. She picked up a standard wrench. No breaker bar, no hammer. She fit it onto the distributor and gave it a firm, steady pull. There was no groan of stressed metal, no violent snap. There was only a soft, satisfying click as the seal broke and the seized distributor turned smoothly in its housing. The garage fell completely silent. Rick and Gary stared, their jaws slack. Kevin let out a low whistle. Maya had just done the impossible, and in that moment, she understood everything. The custom fuel line, the weld mark, the drag slip. It was all connected. This car wasn't just broken, it had been sabotaged by a cheap repair decades ago, and her grandfather had built a complex, unique system to bypass the damage, a system only he, and now she, would understand. The silence was broken by Al's sputtering rage. He saw the admiration in his employee's eyes, and it felt like a betrayal. His authority, built on years of bluster and intimidation, had evaporated in a single click of a wrench. That was just a lucky trick, he stammered, his face flushed with humiliation. He desperately needed to regain control. You don't know this engine. You don't know anything about its soul, its history. Maya stood up straight, holding the distributor in her hand as if it were a trophy. She turned to face him fully, her eyes cold and clear. The time for quiet confidence was over. It was time for the truth. You're wrong, Al, she said, her voice cutting through the garage. It didn't carry anger, but the weight of generations. I know everything about this car's history. I know it better than anyone else alive. She took a step toward him. The mechanics instinctively stepped back, creating an arena in the center of the garage. I know about the custom fuel bypass that was installed to compensate for a warped intake manifold, she said, her voice rising with each fact. I know about the chassis reinforcement welded on after it took a hard hit at the yellow belly drag strip in 1975, and I know who did the work. She paused, letting the weight of her knowledge settle in the room. This car was the last major project my grandfather, William Pops Washington, ever worked on. He poured his heart into saving it. Maya's voice was now shaking with controlled fury. He did it right here, in his own shop, the one that stood on this exact piece of land before it was taken from him. A collective gasp went through the garage. Kevin's eyes went wide. Rick and Gary looked from Maya to Al, who had frozen, his face turning a sickly, pale white. The conflict was no longer about a car. It had become about history, family, and a deep-buried injustice. This isn't just an engine for me, Maya declared, her words landing like hammer blows. This is my family's legacy, and you are standing in my grandfather's home. The fight was no longer about finishing a repair job. It was about reclaiming a birthright. The revelation shattered the atmosphere of the garage. It was no longer a workplace. It was a crime scene with a history that had just been unearthed. Al stood motionless, exposed and stripped of his authority. The sneer was gone, replaced by the slack-jawed look of a man whose world had just been dismantled in front of his employees. His past, or the past he had built his business on, had come back to haunt him in the form of a 28-year-old woman with her grandfather's eyes. The other mechanics, Rick and Gary, couldn't look at Al. They looked at the floor, at the ceiling, anywhere else. Their casual prejudice had curdled into shame. They had been mocking the heir to the very legacy they claimed to respect. Maya didn't wait for an apology she knew would never come. She turned her back on the disgraced owner and returned to the Hemi. Her movements were now charged with a new, formidable purpose. Every turn of the wrench wasn't just a mechanical adjustment. It was an act of reclamation. She wasn't just fixing a car. She was correcting history. Just then, Mr. Sterling, the car's owner, emerged from the office, drawn by the profound silence that had followed the confrontation. He was a tall, imposing man in a tailored suit, used to being in command. "What in God's name is going on out here?" he demanded, his eyes sweeping across the scene. "I heard shouting and now it's a morgue." Al couldn't speak. He just stared at Maya. It was Kevin, the young mechanic, who found his voice. He stepped forward, his loyalty now permanently shifted. "Sir," he said to Mr. Sterling, his voice filled with a newfound respect. "Her name is Maya Washington. She knows the car. Her grandfather. He was the one who originally built it." Mr. Sterling's impatient expression vanished, replaced by one of intense curiosity. He was a collector, a man who cherished history and provenance above all else. The story of his car had just become infinitely more valuable. He looked from Al's pale face to the powerful confidence of Maya. He walked toward the engine, looking at Maya not as a hired hand, but as a master artisan. "Is this true?" he asked her directly, ignoring Al completely. Maya didn't look up from her work. "Every word," she said, her hands moving with unerring grace. "And I'm almost done." She held all the cards now. The engine was nearly ready to roar back to life, but the real final act had yet to begin. With the mechanical obstacles cleared, a new challenge emerged. It wasn't one of steel or force, but of pure knowledge. The unique system her grandfather had jury-rigged was a delicate ecosystem. The timing, the fuel-to-air ratio, the spark plug gap, none of it was standard. The official Dodge service manual was useless here. This engine now ran on the Pops Washington standard, and Maya was the only person left on Earth who spoke the language. Her demeanor had transformed. The quiet, observant mechanic was gone. In her place stood a commander. "Kevin," she said, her voice sharp and clear, "I need a vacuum gauge on the intake manifold, now." Kevin, who had been watching in awe, scrambled to obey. "Rick, get me a timing light." "Gary, check the fuel pressure regulator. It needs to be at exactly 5.5 psi, not 6, not 5, just 5.5. The men who hours before had been mocking her now moved with purpose, their actions sharp and deferential. They had become her pit crew. Maya's growth was undeniable. She wasn't asking for their respect anymore. She was commanding it through pure, indisputable competence. Al watched from the doorway of his office, a powerless ghost in his own garage, as she performed a complex series of adjustments that defied all conventional wisdom. She advanced the ignition timing to a degree that should have caused knocking, then adjusted the carburetor jets in a sequence that made no logical sense. Mr. Sterling watched, utterly fascinated. He wasn't just seeing a mechanic fix a car. He was watching an artist restore a masterpiece, using techniques that were part secret knowledge, part family magic. Maya wasn't just fixing the engine. She was communicating with it, coaxing it back from the dead with a lullaby only she knew. Every movement of her hands showed her evolution, from a defensive outsider to the absolute authority in the room. The garage was no longer Al's. It was her stage. With every component in place and every wire connected, Maya wiped a small smudge of grease from her brow with the back of her hand. The intricate dance was complete. Her grandfather's symphony of steel was ready for its conductor. The subplot of her battle for respect was over. She had won. Her team, and they were her team now, stood back, their faces a mixture of anticipation and awe. The only tension left in the room came from two sources: the ticking clock of the Lone Star Classic car show and the silent, seething rage emanating from Al. He stood by the wall, a portrait of defeat, clinging to one last desperate hope, that after all this she would fail, that the engine would remain silent, giving him a final bitter, "I told you so." The climax was no longer about a mechanical repair. It was about a final reckoning. Maya walked to the driver's side door, her hand resting on the handle. Before opening it, she looked directly at Mr. Sterling. Her voice was steady, clear, and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mr. Sterling, when my grandfather was forced out of business, the new owner of this shop did a cheap repair on this engine. They used the wrong head gasket, and it warped the manifold over time. My grandfather didn't just fix it. He re-engineered it to work around the damage. He saved it." Then she turned her gaze slowly, deliberately to Al. His face was a mask of hatred. "You and your men have been calling it a ghost for over a month," Maya said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more intimidating than a shout. "A ghost is just a story that hasn't been finished. You're about to hear the final chapter." She opened the door, slid into the worn leather seat, and looked at the dashboard that her grandfather had looked at almost 50 years ago. In her hand were the keys. They felt less like metal and more like a key to the past, and the key to her revenge. The entire garage held its breath. Maya didn't just turn the key. She paused. She was initiating the secret handshake, the starting sequence her grandfather had designed. She pressed the gas pedal to the floor 3 distinct times, priming the custom-fed carburetor. She turned the key to the on position, letting the fuel pump hum for exactly 2 seconds. Al let out a tiny, hopeful sneer. He saw a woman fumbling. Then she twisted the key. The starter motor groaned for a single, agonizing second. And then it happened. An earth-shaking, window-rattling roar erupted from the engine bay. The 426 Hemi exploded to life, not with a cough or a sputter, but with a clean, ferocious blast of raw power. The concrete floor vibrated. Tools on a nearby tray rattled. It was the sound of thunder being unleashed, a perfectly tuned and utterly terrifying testament to 2 generations of Washington genius. Mr. Sterling's face split into a massive grin. He was ecstatic, clapping his hands together. "Incredible! The sound! My God, the sound! I'll write her a check. Whatever she wants, just pay it." Maya let the engine idle for a moment, its deep, rumbling purr filling the garage. Then she turned the key, and the sudden silence was just as profound as the noise had been. She got out of the car, closed the door softly, and faced Mr. Sterling. She completely ignored Al. "My price isn't a check," Maya said, her voice commanding the room. Her transformation was complete. She was no longer just a mechanic, she was an agent of justice. "My grandfather, William Pops Washington, died heartbroken. He lost this business because of lies and prejudice, and he thought his work was forgotten." She finally gestured towards Al. not with anger, but with pity. This man called himself an expert while standing on my family's ruins, unable to even diagnose the work of a true master. She turned back to the stunned Mr. Sterling. My price is the story. Your car will be the star of the show. And when every magazine, every blogger, and every collector asks you how you resurrected this impossible engine, you will tell them the truth. You will tell them about Maya Washington, and you will tell them about her grandfather, Pops Washington, the man who gave this beast its soul. She paused, then delivered the final devastating blow. As for my bill for services rendered, I'll be sending the invoice directly to Al's Classic Garage. He can pay me for the lesson in automotive history he just received. Al stood as if turned to stone, utterly and completely broken. The threat was clear. If he refused to pay Maya's invoice, Mr. Sterling, a man with immense influence in the automotive world, would personally ensure that the story of Al's incompetence and humiliation would be the main headline. He was trapped. He had lost his best client, the respect of his employees, and in a few short days his entire reputation would be dismantled in front of the whole world. Mr. Sterling looked from the shattered, pathetic figure of Al to the powerful, resolute Maya. A slow, deep smile of genuine admiration spread across his face. That, he said, his voice booming in the quiet garage, is the greatest story I have ever been a part of. You have a deal, Ms. Washington. The world will know your grandfather's name. Maya simply nodded, her mission accomplished. Her revenge wasn't loud or violent. It was precise, elegant, and permanent. It wasn't about the money. It was about justice, served cold. The roar of the Hemi was the sound of her grandfather's voice, finally being heard after decades of forced silence. She began to pack her tools. Kevin, the young mechanic, rushed over to help her, his hands shaking slightly. I've never seen anything like that, he whispered, full of reverence. For the first time, Maya gave a small, genuine smile. He was the best. She picked up her toolkit and walked toward the large bay door, not looking back. She left Al standing alone in the wreckage of his pride, the smell of her victory now permanently overpowering the scent of his oil and arrogance. She had not only fixed the car, she had reclaimed her past and secured her future. The name Washington was back in the business of making legends. 2 days later, the 1969 Dodge Charger was the undisputed king of the Lone Star Classic Car Show. A massive crowd surrounded the roped-off display. The car wasn't just gleaming under the spotlights, it felt alive, its engine humming with a deep, confident idol that spoke of mastery. A journalist from a popular auto magazine held a microphone up to Mr. Sterling. This is the car no one could fix. What's the secret? Who's the miracle worker? Mr. Sterling beamed, his voice full of passion. He didn't just answer. He told the story. He spoke of a forgotten genius named William Pops Washington, a legend in East Austin who had been wronged. Then he spoke of his granddaughter, Maya Washington, a prodigy with her grandfather's gift in her hands. She didn't just fix an engine, Sterling announced to the crowd and the journalist's camera. She resurrected a soul. She's the only one who could, because her family's legacy is baked into the very metal of this car. He made a point to mention how the car had been saved from the incompetent hands of a certain Austin garage that had let it sit for a month. He never said Al's name. He didn't have to. The entire Texas classic car community would know exactly who he was talking about by morning. Miles away, in a quiet part of Austin, the bay doors of Al's Classic Garage were closed. The phones were silent. An invoice-paid receipt for an astronomical sum, issued by Meade, Washington Consulting, lay on Al's messy desk, a final, bitter monument to his humiliation. Maya wasn't at the car show. She didn't need the applause. She was standing inside a dusty, derelict building, her grandfather's original shop. The air smelled of stale oil and old memories. Using the money from Al's lesson as a down payment, she was buying it back. Kevin was beside her, sweeping away decades of dust, now her first official employee. Maya walked to the front wall and hung up a newly restored vintage metal sign she had been keeping for years. It read, Washington and Son Automotive. With a small smile, she took out a marker and carefully added 2 words at the end. The sign now read, Washington and Son and Granddaughter Automotive. The legacy was home. Maya's story is a powerful testament that talent, truth, and family legacy can overcome any prejudice. It's a reminder that justice isn't always about punishment, but about restoration. restoring a name, a history, and a future. Her victory was for every person who was ever underestimated. If you watched until the end, show your support by commenting, "I watched until the end" below. It helps our channel more than you know. What did you think of Maya's revenge? Was it the perfect way to honor her grandfather, or would you have done something different? Let us know your thoughts. We read every single comment. We know you love stories where justice is finally served, and we have another incredible one ready for you. It's about a chef who gets revenge on a food critic who tried to ruin him. The video is popping up on your screen right now. Click on that video and we'll see you there. Thank you for watching.